I always feel strange on New Year's Eve, especially when it's the half hour before New Year's Day. Suddenly, I feel as though the last half hour of a year or decade actually means something, unlike when it's the last half hour of a day. This time around was no exception. It was soon to be January the 1st, 2015. By 11:30 PM, my family and I were praying for a good year. We're a religious Catholic family, but we don't take it too seriously, like some of those extremist nuts who make us look bad. We finished our prayers at 11:42, with me leading my family to say the Apostles' Creed. None of us had it memorized, but I had it in my confirmation book. I received the sacrament of confirmation in February 2014. From 11:42 PM and on, we eagerly awaited the arrival of 2015. I got out my camera and began to record at 11:51, right as my older sister and stepfather began playing with my little sister. Much of the video was like that. We threw some of her dolls around as she watched them, causing her to laugh very hard. When it got to 11:58, my mother got 4 red plastic cups and some wine. She poured a very small amount of wine for my older sister and me, saying, "They're almost old enough to drink." When she gave us our cups filled with a small lick of wine, my mother said, "It's only for toasting." Of course, she didn't give any to my little sister. She didn't seem to mind anyway. At midnight, we toasted each other as we watched the fireworks go off on the Space Needle on live television. When I sat back down, I realized that I'd have to drink my cup. I didn't know if I should, but I gave it a go anyway. I took one sip and immediately handed it back to my mother. It tasted horrible, though I admitted, at least I tried it. I can't recall if my older sister drank from her cup. I recorded until around 12:05 AM. From then on, the New Year's joys seemed to die down. I used the computer for another hour before I got a call. I checked who was calling me. It was my friend Daniel. Daniel and I have known each other since August 31st, 2009. I can't count how many times I've visited his house within the time we've known each other. In 2014, I began spending the night more often at his house, with the first instance of 2014 being New Year's Day of 2014. He and I are the definition of best friends. I left what I was doing on the computer and went to my room to talk to Daniel. He and I shared the obligatory Happy 2015 greeting before talking about pretty much nothing. You know, typical talks between 17-year-old friends. We began talking about Spider-Man potentially returning to Marvel, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, and how well we thought J.K. Simmons portrayed J. Jonah Jameson, Sam Jackson's portrayal of Nick Fury, and other admittedly nerdy things. Daniel was practically a born Marvel fan, whereas I had only recently become a Marvel fan. We had been talking for a while before I went to close out everything I was doing on my computer. We then resumed talking. The second half of our conversation began with us doing a dumb roleplay over the phone. Daniel pretended to be the Foxy the Pirate Fox. I pretended to be his roommate. Of course, the way those usually went was that Foxy would act like a sex-hungry creep and I'd be his next victim. We meant nothing by it though, it was all just dumb fun. After a while, it was already close to 3 AM. By then, I was already in bed. Daniel was still pretending to be Foxy, and I was still pretending to be a scared little roommate. The conversation would have ended with him crooning "nighty night," or "I'll see you tonight, matey," in that deep rough voice he used to pretend to be Foxy. The phone would have hung up, and I would have been well on my way to sleep. I would have been so much happier if that happened. The weird stuff began when we stopped the roleplay. Daniel said that he felt like he was in a dark bedroom with long curtains. This piqued my curiosity, because I'd seen a place like that in a dream I had in 2012. I remember exactly what the bedroom looked like. It was only barely lit by whatever light was outside, the light looking light lavender in hue. And I remember seeing the circular bed that sat before the window. The window was draped with very tall satin curtains, and I remember the bedroom had a bit of an uneasy vibe to it. I asked Daniel if he saw this, and he said that he could. He began to tell me about a dream he had as a child, being in that very same room and being accosted by what might have been a mummy or a zombie. Not long after this, he and I began to feel what felt like claws digging into the tops of our skulls. They wouldn't relent. It almost felt like I was about to get brain surgery or something. When those feelings went away, it was replaced with the sight of a face. The face looked at me with wide eyes and they weren't blinking. I saw a long nose and a horrid grin that accompanied it. It just wouldn't stop staring at me, no matter what I did. I was afraid to shut off my phone, the only light source I had in that ungodly hour. The face then slowly began to rot away. The eyes fell out, the nose grew shorter and the grin got wider as the flesh melted to reveal a ghastly white cheekbones. It continued to melt until there was nothing left but a skull. We then heard screaming in both of our ears. At first, it sounded like someone exhaling to make the sound of a crowd like cheering. But as it travelled further into our ears, it became a death rattle. And once it reached our brains, it became the screams of a man set ablaze. The sheer loudness of those screams made our brains feel like they were going into TV static. The skull receded before charging at us with a jaw wide open. The phone cut itself off at that moment. Neither Daniel nor I hung up, and we couldn't explain it. Daniel's phone was still good on power, as was mine. I called him back at 3:51 AM. After that, I felt as though the world was upside down above me, and I was flying lying down. I saw what I thought was a city, and I felt uneasy as the thought of how high I was flying intruded my mind. More faces began to surround us, each of them staring at us like the first one. I tried to talk to Daniel in order for me to stay sane, yet every time I tried to talk, I was interrupted by more ghastly faces. One of them looked like a doll face with a blonde bob, though the eyes were empty and near the centre of the face, and it sported a thin smile wider than its own head. I even remember seeing bared teeth flash before my eyes, as though the person who possessed them absolutely loathed me. The sights continued until after 4 AM. At that time, I saw myself walking in a cemetery. My head must have been hung very low, because my view of it was directly top down. I continued to walk until I stopped at an open grave. Within it contained a corpse. It was the body of someone I love and care about very much, who I will call Bill Elias Coyers II for the sake of his anonymity. I began to cry as I saw Bill lowered into the grave, and I knew I had to describe this to Daniel right as I saw it. Daniel said that he saw Satan had conquered the world, replacing everything that wasn't in his likeness with demons. To make matters worse, Satan pinned all the blame on Daniel, and it seemed as though the damage was irreversible. After that, I reassured Daniel to remain strong and persevere. I told him that no matter what, these things would never happen. I assured him that all of it was only an effort to drive us insane and that we would get through it. After I said these things, the things we saw finally began to fade away. By 4:40 AM, everything was back to normal. However, I felt like a changed person. Feelings of fear were replaced with those of solemn anxiety, similar to someone who just returned from war. I wondered if we'd develop PTSD, though I couldn't say for sure. The conversation had died down to near silence. Right when it ended, my mind already began to suppress the memories of those sights. I felt as though my mind was saving those memories in order for me to write them down later, and then it would forget them completely. This is the only way I can cope with what I saw in those godforsaken hours. Daniel went to bed shortly after these events, and the conversation officially ended at 4:51. I, however, didn't feel tired anymore. I wasn't sure if I could go to sleep, so I stayed up for the rest of the night, watching videos in order to calm myself down. I didn't go to sleep until after 8 AM, and then I woke up at 1:51 PM. I went to the living room and began to type out the words you're reading now. Recording these events has helped me cope with them. This allowed me to share what happened to me that night, and keep it around for as long as I may desire. As I write this, my memories of the events are slowly dying. Only after I complete and publish this, I can finally begin to forget. It's as I said to Daniel after everything had happened. Some things in life are going to be forgotten eventually. Some things are things you don't want to forget. And some things are better left forgotten. My name is Jake. I like music. I like music so much, I even have it written in black marker on the back of my iPod. One day while I was looking up songs on iTunes on my iPod Touch, I came across an album named My Favorite Tunes in the featured section of iTunes. The cover was just a photo of a dark room with a 15 or 16-year-old boy lying on his bed with his eyes closed and headphones in his ears. I thought it was funny that an album named this would show up in the featured section, and decided to buy the album without even checking out the songs in it. It took about 30 minutes to download the entire album. My internet was pretty slow at the time, and during that time, I was playing some songs on my guitar. When it finished downloading, I hopped onto the couch and started listening to the first song. It was the song Rock Lobster from the B-52s, but it sounded a little odd. The notes seemed higher in pitch, and some parts of the song, it just sounded like a big mess of random notes. I just thought it wasn't the song, and it was just me since I hadn't listened to Rock Lobster in a while. When the song was finally over, I started to switch to the next song. I glanced at the cover art and thought I recognized the teenager in the cover art. I thought nothing of it and proceeded to the next song. The second song was We Are the Champions, but it seemed higher in pitch and had spots with jumbles of notes, just like the previous song. But this time it was even more noticeable. Also, I heard someone whisper, Jake, my name, at the end of the song. But I just thought it was my imagination. I was a little scared, but I still had the courage to listen to the next song. The third one's name was Day, and when I listened to it, it was just ambience of a neighborhood or small town alongside a running car engine. It was about 40 seconds long, and when it was over, I was confused. But I still proceeded to listen to the rest of the songs. The next three songs were Sweet Dreams, Don't Stop Believin', and Breakfast in America, all with the same effects as the first two. And I still thought I heard my name being whispered during the songs. Before I played the second to last song on the album, I looked at the cover art of the album again, and I thought I definitely knew that teenager, but I didn't know who. The second to last song was called Night. The first 20 seconds were nighttime ambience, with the sound of someone walking on pavement. After that was the sound of the person who was previously walking, now lockpicking a door. After 25 seconds or so, the door finally opened and the person now sounded like he, or maybe she, was walking up a staircase. When the person got off the stairway, he sounded like he was now walking on carpet. While he was walking, you could hear him whispering. Bathroom, parents' room, laundry room, here we go, Jake's room. After hearing him, now I knew it was a guy, say that, my heart stopped for a second. I now knew that he wasn't in any random building. He was in my house. I started to reach for the phone to call the police while still listening to the song. I heard him open the door and walk for a bit, but then stop suddenly. Say cheese, I heard him say. He then immediately took a picture, and the song was over. I quickly looked at the cover again, and realised that the picture was of me. Probably taken at the same time as this song was recorded. I hesitantly listened to the last song in the album, which is named Best Friends. I heard the same guy from the previous song say, Hello Jake, if you try and call the police, which I know you probably will, let's say bad things will happen. All I want is for us to become, he pauses for about 10 seconds, best friends. I put down the phone and without thinking deleted the album. I quickly went over to a friend's house as my parents were gone to pick up my uncles and aunts from the airport, and told him about the album. He didn't believe me, and when I tried to re-download the album from iTunes, it was gone. He called me a liar and told me to get out of his house. I went home, disappointed and afraid. It's been a couple of months since the incident, and I'm paranoid almost all the time, especially when I go to sleep. I've had no encounter yet with the person who created the album, except for sometimes this one car seems to slow down whenever they pass me by when I'm walking on the sidewalk, and that recently, someone wrote on my iPod, under where I wrote "I like music," it says, "I like music too, Jake." I prayed a prayer taught to me in my youth, as I stood in the field with my weapon in hand. My eyes saw the young man holding the shovel. I was confident he was quick and strong enough to knock my old frail body down if he turned and saw me. He never got that chance. I placed the gun against the back of his head, and before he could react, I had pulled the trigger. I took the shovel from his hands and dug a hole. I stopped digging when it looked about deep and wide enough. I removed a pocket knife from my sock. I cut his clothes off and placed them under the house. I'd use them to stuff a scarecrow or maybe just burn them. Then I rolled his naked body into the hole that I had made and covered it with soil and worms. I found a newspaper that Sarah had put in the garbage. I went to the kitchen and sat at my table. I sat there, reading until the wife came home. She walked in complaining about the grey mutt dog that was clawing at the side of the house. She said I could kill it if I wanted. I knew I was still married to her for a reason. Then I thought about the young fool's clothes and the smell of death in a hound's nostrils. I ran outside as fast as my old scarred legs could carry me. I wanted to make the dog suffer, so when I got close to it, I took my knife and grabbed a hold of the damn beast by the neck. I began to choke it as I stabbed at its glazed, sickly eyes. It bled till it stopped bleeding, and gasped for air until it stopped breathing. It was dead. The wife, who had probably come out to make sure my jeans didn't get stained up too badly, was pointing at the house. As one of its last acts, the stupid creature had knocked down a wooden board blocking the space between the foundations of the house. This revealed to my woman a clue to my act. She approached the house and gathered up torn remains of a white, blood-stained shirt and a pair of jeans, as well as some other, less mentionable articles of clothing. "What were these doing here?" she asked in her usual unattractive, weak voice. A tag stood out of the unmentionable items, and my wife read aloud. "Ryan Wellcrest," she said. "What sort of infant wrote his name in his underwear?" I shouted in my head. The name searched my wife's small brain for a place in her memory to call home. She finally said, "Was that the boy we hired to do some work for us?" I remarked that the name sounded familiar, and thought that my wife's name would look particularly nice carved into a gravestone. I decided against bashing her head into the wall, knowing I would need someone to prepare my breakfast. "I guess he must have got himself into a scuff and lost his clothes," I said, prolonging her confusion. "You should probably fix them up for him. I'll make sure to give them to him when he returns next week." She tried to say something, but I covered her mouth, and like the obedient wife, she pretended as though she did not speak. I went into the house to smoke and think, as the godliness of the murder faded into the anxiety of a normal man's life. It was 9 o'clock when the pretty girl showed up at the house crying. She said she was looking for her husband who worked my field. He had not arrived home in the hours since his shift had ended. I explained to her that a nice woman had taken him to her home. She left infuriated. My wife, who had overheard me speaking to this woman from the kitchen, asked me about what I had said. When I did not answer, she said, "I hope you burned the body," and went on with her work. I cared for that woman so very much at that moment, and I somewhat regretted my frequent secret desire to see her life end by my hands. The clothes served no purpose. I couldn't fit into them, so they were used by my wife to make a quilt, which did not make me unhappy. I sometimes would sit in my rocking chair, wrapped in the quilt, and think about the stupid boy who had died to make it, and how pleasant it was putting an end to him. Soon, the world became cold with the winter. I took on workers to assist me in maintaining the grounds. The memory of my past action was fading, and even the quilt could not bring back the feeling of pulling the trigger and killing the man. After much thought, I decided to repeat the crime just once more. Robert, one of the older workers, had a wife who brought him lunch each day. I wondered what it would be like to hide her body just out of the way of the land he worked. I thought about watching him suffer each day. He would be alone and cold, working for a man who had taken his life away, a man who only paid him enough to continue his meaningless suffering. On the first day of December of a uniquely unexciting year, approximately 3 years after my first victim's death, I had thrown a party to celebrate nothing and invited both of my employees. I also invited members of my church, and for the first hour of the party, I walked in the woods. It was freezing cold, but my blood was afire. As far as I could see, this was one of the few times of true pleasure existing in my life. After the correct amount of time had passed, my wife had did as I had ordered. She was to send Robert's wife to bring me my coffee in my favourite green mug and invite me to join with the others. I played on the cold ground of a hiking path and closed my eyes. I would appear to be either dead or dying, and the woman would come to help. At the ideal moment, I would take hold of my knife and cut her body open. I would rip and tear at her weak being as much as I could have ever dreamed. After some time, I heard soft murmuring and I felt the woman's warm hand on my cold chest. I opened my eyes to see the fly to my spider. She was fat and her face was wrinkled, almost more so than mine. While she left something to be desired as a woman, she would be a lovely corpse. I grabbed a hold of her and clawed at her meat. Then, as I hissed into her ear to disturb her dying soul, I slit her throat. I heard panicked breathing, and then a scream. It sounded like a man being boiled alive. A large muscular hand grabbed me by the throat. It was Robert, whose wife I had just so joyfully murdered. His face was full of a strange anger, not warranted by the situation. He was drooling, crying and sweating, making his face altogether too wet. I was going to offer the man a cloth to wipe himself off before he killed me. That was the only way I could see the situation being resolved. Then there was the sound of a gunshot, and my attacker's head split open. In the dark, I could see Sarah holding my gun. At this moment, she had created a sense of trust. I had not felt such a strong sense since I was a young man. We stripped the bodies of their clothing and buried them both right there beneath rich soil and dead leaves. Both of us smiled as we left. The party concluded several hours later. By the time we had returned, the guests were far too drunk to notice their friends were no longer present. When the last of the party guests departed, Sarah and I sat and talked about little things such as the creaking of the floorboards and the chirping of the birds. She was making me a quilt, including some extremely familiar materials the entire time. This was a wonderful evening. I yawned and ascended the stairs to my bedroom. Tomorrow would be a day of rest for a God-fearing man. Sunday was tomorrow, and I had been asked to do the reading at the weekly service. October 30th, 1962. I've been stuck under here for days. No food, no water. Both my parents are dead. I don't know what kind of pandemonium and horror plagues the world above. I never will. I write this by a burning fixture. Once this bulb of incandescent light dims and extinguishes itself, I will remain. I will be left to die alone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Natalia Flemingbrook. and I am 14 years old. My father was an American CIA agent. My mother was an immigrant fleeing from the USSR. He met her on a deep cover operation. She was a woman of simple means, hoping to escape the oppression of the Iron Curtain. He managed to rescue her and bring her to the United States under deep cover, and we lived peacefully as a family, but only for a while. As tensions between America and the motherland began to rise, my mother came under scrutiny. Native Russians like herself, citizens or not, were being questioned under the premise that they may be spies. Things got worse for my family. My father's career was compromised because, to the CIA, he was literally sleeping with the enemy. Recently, Cuba had their missiles pointed at the US mainland. Tensions were finally at the breaking point. Our town held a nuclear fallout drill in the middle of talks. In one of these routine drills, our father grabbed a few prepared suitcases and commanded us to leave with him. He didn't believe it was a drill. Neither did my mother and I. We thought this would be it. My father drove us out to one of the government's various fallout shelters. He was given the combination for this particular vault. This vault was quite large, about the size of an average living room combined with a kitchen. I still remember its name. It was posted outside of the door. Vault 975. Everything inside the house looked almost new. Nothing had been tampered with. Naked light bulbs provided barely sufficient lighting for our relatively cramped quarters. Cans of non-perishables occupied the shelves, while spare generators, gasoline and sea rations lined the walls. Television that sat in the corner looped a motion picture about fallout drills. Needless to say, my father picked out a place that promised to supply our needs, or somewhere that was supposed to at least. Right when we hit the door, my father locked the outmost facing door shut. There were 3 doors. The first, the one he closed. The second, and the third. Why a third? It was a last resort. Only in the case of a complete and total fallout of biological life were we supposed to hermetically seal it. But I didn't really see the purpose of that third door. If life was that bad, did we really want to live to see it? These were all questions I pondered the answers to as I explored my new environment. My mother was very eager to get out of there. She had anticipated that we would only be residing there for 2, maybe 3 days. She was questioning my father about the length of the time we'd be staying there. Yet, he kept a very guarded demeanour about the entire situation. He repeated multiple times that he couldn't disclose the details for security reasons. When we were all settled, my father used the in-shelter phone to dial some government officials. He inquired about the state of the outside world. The questions that he was asking were very pointed and specific. I suppose they were important, like if the drill was anything more than a routine, if there was even a fallout to begin with, if this entire trip was just a result of extreme paranoia. Once he got off the phone, he started helping us unpack. The suitcases that he had us bring were full of toiletries. Soap, toothpaste, and a toothbrush, and hair grooming equipment were all neatly organised in compartments. My mother and I grew worried at this, she more than I. My father's meticulous packing of these items implied that he planned for a long-term stay. My mother worriedly asked him when we would be leaving. He curtly told her that we would be staying the night. She remained composed. One night of this, and we would be back home. That's what the plan was. And that's what we thought. Kidney beans and stale water sufficed as dinner. My mother and father were nearly silent the entire time. My mother was mad with worry. My father was just plain mad. The phone calls were getting increasingly worse. The government had long given him clearance to return, but he wasn't going to acquiesce. He kept on saying that it wasn't safe. My mother had discovered the true reason for his irrational behaviour and series of decisions: a state of citizenship. I had primarily suspected this, but my father verified my suspicions with each thing he said and did. Our vault had garnered a marginal feeling of a home by bedtime. My mother and I played card games and listened to the radio while my father nervously jotted down notes in his government-issued notepad. It was around 11 PM before we settled for bed. As I crawled under my sheets and kissed my mother goodnight, I wondered about this situation. I worried about my father. Was he going to be alright? Was he going to be the same after this? A nagging, more worrisome question also lingered in the back of my mind. Were we going to get out of here at all? A loud crash jolted me awake. I looked over at my analog clock. It was 3 AM. From the other room, my father was throwing things and screaming insane ramblings. I didn't hear my mother at all. I proceeded with caution as I slowly opened the door. Underground chaos is what I found. All of our food was spilled on the floor and mixed with copious amounts of gasoline. The resulting concoction was quite noxious. Its fetid stench pervaded my sense of smell. The television playing the pictures earlier now showed nothing but buzzing static. None of this even closely compared to the worst sight. My father held a pistol to my mother's head. He looked downright maniacal. He cackled as he pulled the trigger, and her brain scattered all over the wall. The remnants dripping down the cold cement. I was ineffably numbed with terror. Retreating to the corner in fright, I watched as my father spelled out a message with the blood. And when he finished, it read, "They forgot us." After he was finished, he shot himself. He embedded the gun far enough into his mouth so that the sparks wouldn't set the place afire. I ran to the door to find a horrific sight. The emergency unlock key for the door was damaged beyond repair. The level 3 door had also been eternally shut. At that moment, I realized it was over. I was forever trapped in the vault. Static blasted from a communications radio. I wasn't aware that one existed. I quickly ran over to it to find the mouthpiece's dead wires separated from the bulk of the receiver. I adjusted the tuning knob until I heard the voices of 2 men speaking. "Javelin 3, any word on Agent Flemingbrook?" "Negative, Mother Eagle. He'll be around soon. Talks have ended and I'm sure he's out of there. Clean up the entrance for 975. We won't be needing these vaults anytime soon." My heart sank. Any hope that I had died at that moment. Upon reflection, it's probably not hellish at all out there. It's probably just fine. Yet, I sit here, destined to die. And you know what the sad part is? They didn't cover our existence up. They didn't need to. They didn't abandon us. They didn't forsake us. They simply forgot us. I awoke, shivering. As I rubbed my eyes, attempting to adjust them to the darkness swallowing my bedroom, I noticed the open window across the room. The curtains danced delicately as the chilly night's air gushed through them. For a second, I relished in the beauty of it, smiling weakly as I did so. The smell of the air was intoxicating as it rushed towards me, causing goosebumps to rise all over my body as I threw my exposed legs over the edge of the bed. A hint of dewy grass permeated through the air as my feet slowly met with the cold, hardwood floors beneath me. I muttered to myself as the moon's rays seeped through the window's glass, creating a shadow that appeared upon my skin as I approached it. "Mum," I whispered, recalling the countless nights she would invade my room as I slept, opening the window. She had a strange obsession with turning off the air conditioner at night. As all parents swore by, she felt that the cold air of the conditioner caused illness, although that theory had long been disproved. Still, even if her theory was justified, and I would befall pneumonia eventually due to my exposure, why on earth would the cold of the night be excluded from this disillusioned hypothesis? After a brief debate with my own mind, I turned my attention back to the open window. As I closed it, I looked out over the sleeping neighborhood. It was so peaceful to look out upon. Knowing everyone slept, oblivious to the beauty surrounding them as they dreamt, was mind-boggling to me.
Even though I was awoken prematurely from my own dreams, I was proud to have at least gotten the chance to see the beauty of the night so many missed out on. Once the window was secure and locked, I turned back towards my bed, hopped in its diminishing warmth, and closed my eyes. Once the darkness of my own eyelids enveloped me, I heard something strange. The sound reminded me of the countless days in school when everyone shuffled through their bags, attempting to find a book they knew they left at home. Immediately, my eyes shot open and I arose from my stunted slumber. There, at the edge of my bed, was a darkened figure. Shock immediately rushed through my body, alerting the hairs on the back of my neck into action. "Alexandria," it spoke, its voice a deepened rasp. As if I wasn't already frightened enough, its horrifying, dry voice and the fact that it knew my name added to my increasing anxiety. As my heart raced, beating against my chest as a hammer would to a nail, the being grew close, slithering towards me as a snake would its prey. "What?" I stuttered, as a black mist surrounded us. The hood over its head, providing a sufficient enough shadow to hide its face within, seemed to move as agile as running water. The iridescent glow radiating off its cloak captivated me momentarily as I stared upon it. Once my trance had been broken, the amazement was once more replaced by overwhelming fear. Within its hands, a dusty book came into view. Though I was trembling, choking on the thick black fog within the air, I couldn't take my eyes off the archaic book resting in the being's hands. "I wish to read you a tale," it said, looking down at the book. The atmosphere seemed to thicken, almost as if a running car was present. The creature conveyed no signs of discomfort, and it, in no rush whatsoever, nestled into a cozy position as it cleared its throat, releasing a heap of dust into the air. I sat still, unwilling to make even the slightest of movements, in fear of what the peculiar creature would do should I reject its reading. All logic would suggest that I was experiencing some sort of lucid nightmare, but the chills down my spine felt real, and so did the thing sitting adjacent to me, even though I know it couldn't have been. There was a girl that lived sleeping in a town. She snuck out of her house, meeting up with her friends against her parents' strict curfew. After too much drink, she hitched a ride with the boy she had met at the bonfire. Her friends were much too drunk to take her home. As they drove, the boy decided the ride home would not be free. The girl explained that she had no money, but the boy shrugged his shoulders. He explained money wasn't the only way to settle the debt. Immediately, the girl shook her head, asking the boy to stop the car, but he didn't comply. Instead, he slapped her across the face, threatening her as he did so. It said, his tone darkening as it turned the page. The girl didn't have much of a choice in the matter, as the boy pulled over to the side of the road, locking the doors of his car. No matter how hard she screamed, or how much strength she put into fighting back, the boy did not let up. Her efforts were fruitless, it said, glancing at me dramatically before turning back to the book. After the debt was settled, the boy unlocked the car and let the girl go. Once she was sure she was gone, she wiped away the freezing tears falling from her eyes. Being that she was miles away from home, she began walking, clutching onto her sides as she proceeded down the street. She began to wonder why no one else was around as she walked the barren road, the wind flowing through her raven hair as she did so. The chilly night's breeze travelled up her nostrils, causing her to wrap her shivering arms much tighter around her in an attempt to keep warm. She continued walking aimlessly, searching for anyone, someone to assist her. Her efforts were fruitless, it said, turning the page of the book. As it spoke, I stared intently upon it as if I was a child being read a bedtime story. I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. All of my will had been removed and placed within its hands. The girl wandered around the neighborhood, the streetlights flickering overhead as she began shouting. She wanted so badly for someone to answer her calls, but her attempts were fruitless, it said, turning the page once more. Finally, she saw lights approaching from afar. Instinctively, the girl ran towards it, waving her arms in the air frantically as the lights grew close, it said, clearing its throat as it turned the page. But the girl's happiness quickly disintegrated as she recognized the car. It was the same vehicle she had been held captive within minutes prior. Flashbacks of the vicious attack replayed in slow motion within her head as she began crying hysterically. She wanted so badly to run, dodging the car recklessly driving towards her. But she was hurt. She didn't have enough time to respond. She only had time to blink before the lights blinded her and an indescribable pain initiated at the base of her pelvis, it said, licking its bony finger before turning the page. She laid on the asphalt-paved street, choking on her own blood, as her eyes searched for someone to help her. All she could do was watch as the light diminished from the neighborhood, leaving her to die alone within the darkness, it said, before closing the book. Slowly, the being stood up, lowering its hood as it revealed its eyes without irises. I'll be on my way now. I have others to read to, it said, stretching its elongated arm towards me before caressing my shivering cheek with its index finger. Just as swift as the words escaped its mouth, it flew out of the open window, a black mist trailing closely behind it. Once it vanished from sight, the black mist evaporating within the air, I regained control of my body. I let out a loud cry, shaking uncontrollably as I stared out of the window the creature had escaped from. "Mum!" I yelled, afraid to get out of bed. No answer. "Mum!" I repeated, slowly lowering my feet to the cold floor. But it wasn't wood beneath my feet at all. The ground was rough, almost like asphalt. Quickly, I realized I was outside, standing in the middle of the street. "Hello?" The streetlights overhead flickered as a cold breeze blew through my hair. I crossed my arms, attempting to harbor any warmth my body once sought refuge in. "Hello!" I shouted, my voice cracking as anxiety washed over me. In the distance, a faint light approached. I wandered towards it, waving my arms in the air to attract the passerby's attention. "Hey! I need help!" I yelled, walking towards the light. The light grew, expanding its illumination throughout the neighborhood. Worry began seeping out of my skin as I noticed how fast the light was approaching. Rather quickly. I realized that the light derived from the headlights of a vehicle. Unwilling to fall victim to a hit and run, I turned to try and run away, but I tripped over something. There, lying in the middle of the street, was a girl. I approached her, kneeling down as the headlights from the speeding car provided just enough light to illuminate where the body laid. "Are you I trailed off. Once I saw the girl's face, all of the night's events became clear. She wasn't some random girl I tripped over coincidentally. She was me. "No! Wake up!" I yelled, cradling my own head. My body was limp, all signs of life gone. "No!" I said, lowering myself to the ground before standing up weakly. Though I was scared, confused, and angry, I turned towards the headlights. "You fucker!" I screamed, running towards the car. The car sped up, matching my anger-driven enthusiasm. But when we met, I passed through the car as if it wasn't even there. When I turned to look behind me, there was no sign of that car or its headlights. All I could see in the distance were flashing red and blue lights, So, instead of denying my reality, instead of rejecting the truth, I sat beside my bloodied body and watched on as the ambulance grew close. As it approached, I could only think about that mysterious being that woke me in the middle of my slumber. A cold chill swept through the air just then, as I reminisced upon the dusty old book within the figure's hand. In its raspy voice, I mouthed the words of my own demise before closing my eyes as the sirens tore asunder the peace of the night.
It was an utterly normal day for me. Well, actually, I'd gotten a parking ticket and a jury summons, so it was a pretty shitty day for me. However, neither of those would seem of any consequence when I got home at the end of it to find my computer infected. But maybe I'm going a little too fast. Let me take a step back, and we'll start from when I returned from work that day. As always, the first thing I did was go through the mail. Feel free to imagine my aggravation at the summons here. It didn't help either that everything else was junk mail and bills. Whatever, just one of life's many joys. Preferring to relax a bit before dealing with them, I went straight to my computer to do, well, nothing at all. Just some browsing, check my email, etc. Doing nothing can be good for the soul. I noticed my computer running much slower than usual though. Certainly slower than it was yesterday. My first reaction was to look at my taskbar to see if maybe my antivirus was updating or something, or maybe Windows was downloading new features. You know, the usual culprits. But alas, no such luck. I tried to put up with the slow speeds for a while, just wanting to get a level head before I had to deal with troubleshooting this thing. Yet another nuisance on this day that seemed so right for them. Eventually, my patience reached its limit though. My attempts to relax at the terminal having crashed and burned, I went to address this problem now, determined to find a way to wind down if it killed me. Upon opening my computer, a red flag raised. My hard drive had no free space left on it at all. To put things in perspective, I have a 1TB internal hard drive, with almost nothing on it. I got this computer from a friend of mine, much techier than I, and while I don't know nearly as much about computers as she does, I know that a terabyte is a lot of space, and my entire computer didn't even use 10% of it yesterday. Clearly, something was going on, and I suspected some kind of virus or malware. I heard there are some out there that will create garbage data on your system, flooding it with pointless files just to fill it up and make it run slow. I'd always wondered what possible benefit there could be in this, but my friend told me that there are just some scammers who want to infect you with one of these viruses, then try to charge you a fee to clean and speed up your PC. Fortunately, I hadn't received any such contact. Yet. Still, my suspicions seemed grounded. I gave up and performed a scan on my antivirus program. A full scan. Sure, one might think a quick scan would be faster, but if it didn't turn up anything, and I was then forced to do a full scan afterwards, it would just wind up taking longer than if I just went with the full scan from the start. Kind of roundabout logic, but I just wanted to get this resolved so that I could finally relax my computer. I went to watch some TV for a while. Nothing good on. I really just wanted to go browsing. A couple hours later, I heard the little scan complete chime from my speakers and went to examine the results. No viruses, no malware. I was baffled. However, there was one thing of note on the screen. One file could not be scanned due to corrupted data values. The window had three options: list, report, and dismiss. I clicked list to see the details of the file, and it showed up a file made of a bunch of square box characters. Blank 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 .anima was the file name. This was no file I put there, and I'm sure that it wasn't there before. I'd never installed any kind of language extension on my computer, so the file name was written in characters from some other language, maybe Japanese or Arabic or something. I'd also never heard of the .anima file type, but that could wait. The file location was listed in some secluded subfolder of System32. That's where viruses like to hide out, right? I made my way to the folder and examined the file. As expected, it read as an unknown file type. My computer didn't even know what program would open it. Not that I had any plans of doing so just yet. Besides, what surprised me more was the file size. Or rather, the lack of one. There was no file size listed, that is. It was just a garbled mess of text, if you could call it that. It looked like some sort of glitch, but maybe they were some weird kind of special characters. I'd seen people make signature art using what looked like garbled messes of text before. One of the first things I learned about computers was that a computer does what you tell it to, not what you want it to. That is, everything happens for a reason. Someone had to program this behavior, make it display like this. I didn't know what the file was, but I knew I didn't need it spamming up my system, as I was sure it was doing. So, of course, having found the little bugger, I immediately deleted it. All the problems went away, I was able to browse in peace once again, the traffic ticket was overturned, and I managed to weasel my way out of jury duty. That's what I'd like to say. Instead, a little Windows message popped up, telling me that the file could not be deleted. Access was denied. There was no question at this point. Definitely some kind of virus. I tried and I tried, but nothing I did was able to get rid of the bugger. After 4 attempts, a second window appeared over the usual cannot delete message. This one was formatted like a Windows message, except that there was no title in the top bar of the window, and there was only one word of text: stop. This was accompanied by 2 choices: yes or no. I considered my options, but knowing that this was a virus, and it wasn't willingly going to allow me to delete it, I chose yes. Thankfully, the window terminated as it should have, and I was back to the Explorer window. I decided to do some research, as I probably should have done before messing with the file at all in retrospect. Putting up with incredibly slow browsing speed, I ran a search for the file name by copying the characters. When that turned up nothing, I tried just searching for the .anima file type, which I'd never heard of. No results. Maybe this was some kind of brand new virus. Maybe the antivirus software hadn't found a way to recognize it yet, and no one had encountered it thus far. Maybe I was its very first victim. I was outraged. This is just fucking perfect, I said to myself, spewing all sorts of vulgarities, the likes of which would have resulted in no less than a dozen slaps from even the saltiest of nuns. I didn't want to deal with this right now. I didn't want to deal with it ever. But I especially didn't want to deal with it now. I left the computer for a while after that, just to find some other way to wind down. I wasn't that successful. The next day, I was still pretty annoyed, but I was at least more level-headed than I was the day prior. And this was my weekend, so I'd have plenty of time to figure this out. I called up the friend of mine whom I'd gotten the computer from. She attested that she had no knowledge of any such file on it, nor of how it could have been gotten there. She did offer to help me troubleshoot it, thankfully. After I told her all that I had done, she seemed pretty convinced of my theory, that it was some brand new kind of virus without any currently known method of being dealt with. Unfortunately, she wasn't nearly skilled enough to try picking apart an unknown virus fresh off the market, so her help ended there. Great. With nothing left to do, I decided to experiment with the file. It took a full day to back up my important files on a separate drive, hopefully without carrying the virus over with them, and the following day, I was able to start dealing with the thing. The file wasn't a standalone executable, or it would have run by itself when I double-clicked it. Having no knowledge of what program the file was intended to run with, I started cycling through all the programs on my computer, trying to find something that would work. First up was Notepad, as I found a lot of unknown files can be read in text format. This one turned up as a bunch of the missing character box symbols again, so it could be read as a text file, but it was all in another language. I guess that's a start. For a lack of anything else to try, I continued through the list of programs. Next up was Windows Photo Viewer. I didn't expect anything to happen, since if the file had been opened in Notepad, that meant that it had to be some kind of text-based file, right? Well, Somehow, PhotoViewer was able to read the thing, and it came up with an image of a nice little suburban house somewhere. If it weren't for the subtle cultural hints like the buildings in the background and the style of mailbox, I would have assumed it to be an American suburb. Unfortunately, there wasn't any kind of text anywhere in the image, so I couldn't determine the current tree of origin. I tried to move the window to the side for later, but accidentally closed it instead. So, I tried to open the program again with PhotoViewer, and again it worked. But this time, I got a different image. This one of the inside of a car driving on a brick road from a driver's perspective. How was this possible? Even assuming the file could be read by both Notepad and PhotoViewer? It's just one file. Opening it should come up with the same result each time. If this was a virus, it seemed to mess with the functions of my machine something fierce. I opened the file once again in PhotoViewer, and this time I got a string of big, bold white symbols on a black background. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they were Russian characters. Is that where this file's from? Russia? And the images too? Unfortunately, it was an image, so I couldn't copy the text and paste it into a search engine. I was curious though. I decided to take a screenshot of the text so I could look at it later. One print screen and MS Paint opened later, I tried to paste what I'd copied, but again, the image wasn't the same. This time, it was a young woman dressed in formal attire, looking at the camera expectantly. It was the craziest thing. Every time this file appeared on the screen, a new image. From there, I used the undo and redo keyboard commands to quickly erase and repaste the image over and over again. Every time, it was something different. A grocery store, a theatre, someone's living room, a man looking into a mirror, a pair of grave sites. After that, the next time I refreshed the image, I got this. This made me jump a bit. Was this supposed to be addressed to me? Is this what the Russian text before translated to? Someone had to preload all these images into a slideshow and program them into this file. Maybe there were images of this message in all sorts of languages, and these were just the two that I happened to encounter first. Still, something about the big, bold, white text message got to me, and I shut down Paint. Still, I was curious now. I wanted to know what other programs might open this file. I tried Windows Media Player next, curious of how it might interpret the file. Apparently, it read as audio, but curiously the little seek bar didn't move. As the file played, the time count went up, but the bar stayed at the far left, like it might if it was playing some kind of online live stream. The audio was a very clear recording of several people talking in Russian. Hearing it, I was now more certain of what language it was. It was also a hint that I heard dishes clanking and liquid being slurped as the word borscht came up multiple times. I could only assume that this was a recording of some family diner or something. Why was it in the file? I have no idea. The audio was pretty mundane. After 5 minutes or so of nothing particularly interesting happening, I closed out, and this time tried opening it in VLC Media Player. This time it was read as video. I don't know why it'd be any different between the two players, but the same thing happened in VLC, where the time count went up, but the bar never moved. Due to my computer's infection, the video ran extremely choppily, but what I could make out seemed to be a first-person view of someone sitting in an office working on an assortment of paperwork. At times, I saw the viewer's reflection in his computer monitor, and it looked to be the same man who was looking at himself in the mirror in that image that appeared before. Curious. Just to see what happened, I skipped ahead with the seek bar, trying to find other parts of the video. But, as soon as I tried to move it from its position glued to the left side of the window, VLC crashed and I was forced to shut it down. When I did, another Windows message had appeared beneath the window. Again, no title bar in the top bar, and only one line of text. stay out. Again, the options were yes and no. Just to see what would happen, this time I clicked no. That may have been a mistake. The window didn't close, but out of nowhere, my computer started whirring as if it was under incredible strain, and the screen practically locked up. I tried moving my mouse, but I was unable to move it out of the stay out window, which had both options still selectable. Thinking that maybe the computer was having trouble processing the command, I once again clicked no. This time, the reaction was even stronger. Countless message windows began popping up over the current one, all of them identical. Stay out, stay out, stay out, stay out. One after another, they began rapidly popping up over the last, slowing my computer to a literal snail's pace. I tried moving the mouse, and it very slowly crawled its way from the no button. Hoping to end this calamity at this point, I got it to meander over the yes command, and finally clicked it. Just like that, the window stopped appearing, the hard drive stopped whirring, and everything seemed to go back to normal. Or at least, it went back to the way it was before I clicked no. The file was still there, and it still had to be taken care of. I tried once again to delete the file. This time a message popped up reading, "Do not," with the only clickable option being OK. Odd. This message was different from the one I got last time I tried to delete it. Trying to X out of the message window did nothing, so I reluctantly hit OK and it closed. I tried copying the file onto a drive, moving it off my computer, but then I received a Windows error message telling me that the file could not be moved because it's being accessed by another program. The same message came up when I tried just moving it to the desktop for easier access. I was curious to see whether or not this was true, and actually, I hadn't taken a look at my processes to see if maybe there was something going on there that was making my system drag so much. I opened up the task manager and switched over to the processes tab. Sure enough, at the top of the list was one called Anima. It was taking up almost the full 100% of my computer's processing power. Did that mean that this file was not only occupying my whole hard drive, but most of my RAM as well? How big was this thing? Without another thought, I chose to end the process. This resulted in another Windows message. No title. This one read, "Please, no." These titleless messages weren't written by any Pulitzer Prize winner, that's for sure. The clickable options were no and no. Again, unable to exit out. I clicked one of the two no's and the window closed. Underneath it, there was the typical Windows message, asking me if I was sure I wanted to force end the process. Glad that the virus didn't interfere with this function, I clicked the end process, and my hard drive whirred for a moment. Then, just like that, the process vanished. My CPU usage went back to its normal levels, and I was finally able to use the machine freely again. However, the file was still there, in the folder. I could have deleted it there and then, but I wanted to check once again, to make sure that no one else had encountered this little bugger yet. So, now that I was running at almost full speed, I did another search for the .anima file type. Still no results. On a final hunch based on the name of the process I saw running, I tried doing a search for just anima. All that returned was that anima was a Latin word that functionally translates into English as soul. When I read that, it all hit me like a ton of bricks. That file. It couldn't possibly have been, could it? Was that .anima file a human soul? It had to be some kind of prank, played by someone trying to horrify people for a cheap laugh. All of this had to be programmed, a great big illusion messing with my system's functionality and creating all these pop-up messages, images and files, just to trick me into thinking that this could really have been a person, in digital format of course. The very idea is preposterous. Even if there were such a thing as a haunted computer, or some military experiment to extract a human soul into the digital format, there is no reason, no way it would wind up on my computer. How could that have even come about? Granted, I have no better explanation of how such a virus could have found its way into my system. The logical side of me knows better than to believe in some prankster's games, but still, the possibility, however small it may be, still haunts me. What if it had really been a person in there? Their life, their memories, their thoughts and feelings? If so, what had I just done by ending the process and terminating from my system? This wasn't something I wanted to think about. I determined to just delete the file, so I'd never have to think about it again. But, before I did that, I had to know. Curiosity got the better of me, and I tried running the file again, in all the programs that I had tried previously. Notepad now read it as an empty document. No matter what other program I used, it read only as an empty black screen with faint static for audio. There was nothing left. Nothing. Thank you for listening to the end. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to click that like button, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and tap the bell icon to make sure you never miss a story.